You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
Good morning. You're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. I know after a defeat of the New England Patriots, you're looking for some place to take solace, and you know where that place is? Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. I am Rich Cabaceres, coming to you all over the country, if not all over the world, in new and inventive ways on WSAR.com, on Facebook Live, on TuneIn Radio, and on the AM airwaves. And we're going to jump right into the conversation because we have a special guest on the line that is Congressman Bill Keating, Democrat from Massachusetts, and we're going to talk about what's going on today with the memo, what's going on with the government shutdown. How are you doing, Congressman?
Good morning, Rich. Sorry we couldn't get through. We tried to get through with you Friday when we were going through a coffee that we had for the public at Letty's Bakery, and that was a great time to get together with people, and as it is on the show, to talk directly to people.
You know, and I think it's important because we're not only reaching the Fall River area and the Swansea area and the Westport area, but we're also reaching around the country through Facebook Live and the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live cam. So people are watching you all over the country and joining in the conversation that way.
Well, we purchased a whole order of Super Bowl pastries, you know, with chocolate covered the footballs. We thought that would be the good luck, my wife and myself, for the Patriots, but unfortunately, there wasn't quite enough. But you know what? Tom Brady's coming back, and hope springs eternal for next year, and we have the Celtics in first place in the East. So there's a lot going on to really have some fun with, to escape with, to enjoy, and then the things we'll talk about, the more serious issues in government that we're confronting right now.
You know, and I think let's dive into some of those serious issues, because the first thing is this memo that was brought forward by Congressman Devin Nunes from California. And I know it's weird saying Nunes when you're from a Portuguese area and it's called Nunes, but he's a Republican from California, and he released this document about Carter Page. And Trump is saying that this clearly shows bias towards him. How do you feel, Congressman?
Well, I've had the opportunity to see both classified memos, and you know, I can't talk about the second memo. I hope it is released, because point by point, what that memo does, it's not two contrasting stories that we're talking about. The first memo expresses some facts that the director, now this is Donald Trump's FBI director that he appointed, and his comments were there's grave concerns about material omissions of facts that fundamentally impact the accuracy. So that's, I think, lawyer speak for, you know, there were major things that were left out, and it affects the truth. And I can tell you the second memo, and I hope it's released, will clearly, point by point, demonstrate that the nicest thing you could say is it was misleading. But overall, it's not great to have these kind of confidential high-security memos leaked through congressional offices to the public as a whole. And that's something that is a concern to me as someone that's the ranking member in the Foreign Affairs Committee on Terrorism.
Now, the question is begged to be asked that if we're only releasing partial portions of these memos, why not just release the whole thing? If some of it is declassified, then why not just say, hey, you know what? The investigation is done. Let's release the whole thing. The assumption would be that there's still an active investigation going on.
There's an active investigation. However, even Devin Nunes did not read himself the underlying information. The way it's set up to try and really limit the access to such classified information. There's one member of the minority side and one member of the majority side that looks at the underlying facts, and they didn't even do it. And the members of the committee, this is kind of extraordinary, when given the opportunity to look at the underlying issues, you know, what this was based on, voted not to even allow themselves to look at it because I think they didn't want to know what they might find. So this is extraordinary times. We haven't seen this before. It does tend to really cause, I think, the security community, our intelligence community, to be concerned, and they should be. Because if you're looking at what's going on, this isn't the typical partisan fight. that we're used to, unfortunately, in Congress. This is different. You have the FBI director, Christopher Wray, a Trump appointee, saying don't release it, and there's things that were left out of it, and it's not accurate. You have Rod Rosenstein, again a Trump appointee, who's the Assistant Attorney General in charge of Mueller, and you have Stephen Boyd, again a Trump appointee as the Assistant AG, all saying don't release this. So if you're thinking and trying to tell the public there's some great conspiracy, you have to believe it's a conspiracy that's being spun by Trump appointees against him. So it's pretty hard to believe that. And those are all Republicans as well. So I don't think we should fall into the trap of saying this is Republican versus Democrat with so many of the other issues that we deal with. This is a little different, and it's fundamentally different and a concern.
Now, the people who would say that this is showing that there is a clear bias towards Trump would also say that Deputy Director McCabe says the surveillance would have never happened had they not used the Steele dossier, and that's referring to Christopher Steele, who was kind of the informant for a lot of the information.
Rich, I can tell you what's public, and I can't delve into what's still classified, but it's now public, and I heard it aired publicly, so I'll just refer to that rather than any classified information.
Sure.
That indeed the sequence is out of order. That indeed the surveillance had occurred significantly prior to the FBI getting the Steele document in their hands. So that's wrong. That's just wrong because the sequence is out of order. They had already started that, and that's according to what is now public in news sources.
Okay. And the last thing, and I know you have to run, but this government shutdown that's supposed to happen, I believe, on Thursday, how are you feeling right now? What has to get done? And I know I've heard the words come out of your mouth that why do we have to package everything together to get things done? Why can't we do things individually? So what has to get done to keep government up and running?
Well, you brought up a great point. Democracy functions best when things are brought to the floor for a vote. And people don't understand totally when the people that were with me Friday, Senator Rodriguez, Alan Sylvia, when I was in the legislature as well, it's the rules were different in the Massachusetts legislature. In Congress, it's a winner-take-all. So the majority party, no matter who it is, can just say we're not putting it on the floor for a vote. Or they can say we're not allowing amendments if we do. And they can limit debate. And all those things they have control of. And that's happened at record-breaking numbers, unfortunately, in the last year. So that's point number one. When it comes to funding government, there's been 22 instances since I've been there where the Republican Party, because of infighting within the Republican Party, didn't have the votes to keep government open, and they had to reach across the aisle to get Democrats to vote. And in 21 of those 22 instances, I voted to keep government open. So I don't believe on using the tool of shutting government down to try and deal with not having democracy really function the way I just described it. And I hope that's not going to be the case going forward. But what is happening, and the bigger issue, and affects everyone that's listening to you now, is the fact that the real fight is, now that there's been a tax program where it'll take $2.2 trillion to pay back, and that's huge debt. That's a tenth of what our national debt currently is in one fell swoop. Now that we're in that situation, they are looking, being Republican majority, at saying, we're going to now look at this budget, we're going to increase the defense side and push down the side of the budget that deals with the issues at home. Last Friday when I was talking to people, we talked a great deal about the opioid addiction problem that's killing over 100 people a day in our country and what we have to do to deal with that. People like Tom Pasternak was there, a pharmacist who's been a leader in the country on these issues. Laura Washington's been there. And in terms of veterans issues, Laura Carew was there. And I know, Rich, you're a veteran, so you understand the importance of making sure that these programs at home are here for people. And so there's the real thing that affects controversy over these budgets. You cannot keep pushing it down and then raising one side on the defense side and lowering everything else. It's so vital to everyone back here at home. So we have to square that away as well. It doesn't make headlines. but this gives me a chance to tell you behind the scenes, at a fundamental level, this is what we're fighting for, just to try and get some accountability, to try and make sure that this isn't backdoor efforts to deal with Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I'll give you one last thought about how difficult this is. You know, when that tax program went through, and they had the big gathering at the White House, which I think most of your listeners can picture, because it was all over TV.
Right.
The fact was, how come they didn't even have a mock signing of a bill or a signing? I'll tell you, because snuck in the 3-week extension to fund government was a provision to say, we're going to postpone the effects on Medicare, $25 billion cut right off the bat because of that tax bill. And we're going to wait till after the election till people feel the effects of that. So I'm just telling you, as someone that wants to tell the people I represent, that we're getting the tension and the pressure and the substance of cutting Medicare, cutting Social Security, cutting Medicaid, and we pay for that out of pocket, even if we have private health care insurance. So what you're going to see as a result is health care issues in the next several years, if they go unaddressed, really resulting in more money out of people in their own pockets. And that's something I want people to be aware of. That's what I'm fighting against. And that's what some of these issues that get lost with the explosions of information and controversy that we see, hourly to hourly now. I'm trying to keep my eye on the ball and tell people this is where we should be considering, the implications on people in their everyday lives and people that are just struggling to get by on limited incomes and see escalating healthcare costs drain that.
That was Congressman Bill Keating, Democrat from Massachusetts. Thank you so much for your time, Congressman. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich.
Have a great day, sir.
You too.
Thank you. And let's dive into the conversation. We just had Congressman Keating come on, Democrat from Massachusetts, come on and talk about how we need to work together, how we need to come together so we can start preventing things like government shutdowns. We shouldn't be holding the government hostage to get things done. So, I think those words were really important. And he also talked about what happened with the memo. So the memo that we're referring to it's a memo regarding the investigation of Carter Page. And Carter Page was somebody who is a U.S. citizen who volunteered for the Trump campaign, and there were multiple extensions of these investigations. They needed to get a warrant, and every single 90 days they had to renew the warrant with a different piece of information. So every single time they renewed it had to have a separate piece of probable cause. And in this memo, all the material and relevant information seems to have been omitted, and probably in the name of national security. But the interesting thing is it mentions that George Papadopoulos there doesn't appear to be any evidence of cooperation or conspiracy between George Papadopoulos, who was part of the Trump campaign but has been found guilty of working against the United States. Or it was actually he's in jail. So he's in jail for a pretty long time because of the fact that he did some illegal stuff. And let me kind of refresh myself. Or if you want to call in, remind me what George Papadopoulos did in order to go to prison, 508-673-1480. But all these guys are continuing to roll. Anyway, the main piece of this memo is talking about how Christopher Steele was an FBI source. And this Christopher Steele, person from the UK, was kind of giving all this information about Carter Page and was paid indirectly by the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign to do background research and provide information to allow them to use this information against Donald Trump. But unfortunately, the issue is Christopher Steele broke the cardinal rule. When you're an informant And when you're working undercover, you don't release the information to the press, and that's exactly what he did. He released the information to Yahoo News and leaked the info, and he concealed that from the FBI, who later asked him for his information. So, in the memo, it actually says that, in quote, so I'm going to paraphrase actually, he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected. And this is Christopher Steele who's saying that he's desperate that Donald Trump not get elected. So he continued to maintain contact with Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, whose wife was employed by Fusion GPS, who was doing research in opposition of Donald Trump. They were funded by the Democratic National Convention to do this research. So you can see why, if you're looking at this and you have an extreme slant, you would say this is clear collusion against Donald Trump's candidacy, and this is collusion for showing that people in the FBI and the AG's office don't like Donald Trump. So the big question is it? Or is this a couple of people who have the right to speak freely saying that they don't want Donald Trump, but then they have to do their job? You know, you compartmentalize. Whoever I voted for didn't impact how I did my work, because you still have a job to do, and you don't want to lose your job because of an unclear bias. We're going to go to a call before the break. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Yeah, hi, Rich.
How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I thought you explained that pretty well.
I tried.
The points that I would like to make is that Richard, the Steele character, had been dismissed by the FBI. That's one of the points.
You're right.
The other point is that they failed to mention to the judge the Democratic Committee Party, Hillary Clinton, backing the monies of millions of dollars. So the FISA judges, after 2 or 3 different attempts, let it go, which I thought was inappropriate. And when you think about McCabe, when it first came out, announced his retirement date at a young age, 51 or 52 the most. The following couple of weeks, when Ray went and looked at the memo, all of a sudden, 3 terminologies: removed, demoted, or fired.
Now here's the big question.
If that doesn't tell you something, it tells me everything.
Now here's the big question. Why are they going to release just some of the information and not release the rest of it? So why would
It'll be out, Rich. It's coming out this week. You'll see more.
But so here's the question: if Devin Nunes is indeed looking to make sure that all the information is out there to show collusion against the Trump campaign, and at that time it would have been the Trump campaign, if they're trying to show collusion, then why wouldn't they just release all of the information?
Because I think they're still investigating, asking questions, but there's going to be more follow-up. That is guaranteed.
But you just heard Congressman Keating on here saying that the Democrats are ready to release a document right now.
Yeah, they've been lying all the way through it. About this, about that, about whatever. It was going to be the end of the world when that memo came out. All of a sudden, they reversed when the memo came out. Oh, it was a lot about nothing. Well, a lot about nothing when you can go to a FISA court and have the Constitution broken by getting American citizens spied on. Tell me that isn't wrong, and that's not about anything.
Now, again, in order to allow the surveillance to happen, it had to go to the attorneys general, and they had to approve a different set of probable cause every single time the 90 days was renewed. So, I want to be clear. You're arguing kind of the right side of this, and I'm kind of saying the opposite side, because I think it's important to kind of present all the information. Every single time they came for a 90-day renewal, they had to present new probable cause. Every single time
they went, Rich, they never once mentioned about the Democratic Hillary Clinton party donating the money. or given the money.
And that's a problem. If indeed that happened, that's a problem. And you're right, because, or not you're right about that piece, but they did say that they didn't know, and it wasn't disclosed that the money was coming from DNC and the Clinton campaign.
That should have been number one.
Because right off the
I
bat,
think you're going to be hearing from those judges too.
Right off the bat,
like they got egg on their face.
Right off the bat, when you hear FBI informant and you hear also worked for the Democratic National Committee and Clinton campaign, it raises some red flags. So I agree with you that there are some red flags there. Thank you so much for your call.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
We're going back to the callers. You are live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rich.
How you doing?
I'm hanging in, on this whole issue, I'm going to agree with John McCain. The person who benefits out of all of this is Putin.
You think so?
Oh, if somebody said, take that back or I'll blow your head off, I'd say blow my head off. This is exactly what Putin wants. Discrediting, I can say it, of American intelligence. No question about it. We know with Nunes, his last history of running with information to the White House, with information he got from the White House, and all of a sudden Trump says, see, I'm vindicated. Sound familiar?
It's funny because it seems like this is a childish argument that would happen in some type of elementary school.
Oh, agreed.
Where people are looking for confirmation bias as opposed to looking for the actual facts that represent their people.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
On both sides.
When that memo comes out, 4 pages or whatever it happens to be, we don't know anything about it because we don't know what wasn't in the memo.
And that's the thing. If you're going to release information that is being held as confidential because of national security, then you may want to consider that you should start releasing more information that looks exactly like this, because now they've set a precedent. And, I read through this memo. Mm-hmm. It doesn't appear to have violated anything that violates national security, other than you're talking about a British national who committed some of these crimes.
Well, I'll tell you something. I would trust an MI6 British agent over Vladimir Putin. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But this is all playing into this vast conspiracy that all those people in the government are against me. And it does play to Trump's base. Let's be honest here. From what I understand, I don't know anything about Pfizer. It doesn't go through one person.
Right, and that's the way that I understand it.
We have to assume that all these people out there are corrupt or stupid, one of the two.
And actually, because the lines are hot.
Let me close with this idea. If there's no there in terms of Trump, you're even seeing Trey Gowdy getting discussed, and he's as right-wing as you can get. If there's nothing there, why are they making so much noise?
Thank you so much for your call.
Be good.
Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. I totally agree with that last call.
Okay.
But the thing I'd like to talk about is McCabe.
Okay.
Even though his wife was running for a seat in her home state, the money didn't come from Hillary. It came from donors that might have participated giving money to Hillary. Just like all campaigns, Republican or Democrat, they send out fundraising letters.
Yep.
Okay, and I contributed to her campaign.
Wow, okay.
Okay, so it's not like the DNC gave her all this money. It's like Elizabeth Warren sends out fundraising letters. Help support this person because we need this person in Congress. Right. And the money doesn't go to the DNC. It goes to that individual's campaign.
Right.
So there's a little bit of deception of Hillary Clinton did all this.
And, I think that's a fair point. Campaign finance is a fickle thing. And a lot of times, if you look at somebody's campaign finance report, you end up seeing a lot of the same names. They donate to multiple campaigns. And what people do, if they don't understand how it works, is they say, oh, well, that must be somebody who's an operative of whoever the highest person is in that group. Exactly.
Right. And the other thing that I find amazing, when Trump had this $100,000 fundraiser, I don't know how they're doing that, unless they're doing it. It's illegal to contribute more than $1,000 per household.
That's for a state elected official in the state of Massachusetts. But if you're a federal elected official or you're running for federal office, somebody can hand you $1 million and you could be like, okay.
Okay, I did not know that. I thought, because I know what it is in Mass. Because I was on it when they published it in the newspaper. I was on the list which contributed $500, and that was publicized.
Yeah, and let me kind of confirm that again, because I know the big deal is Citizens United came out and it allowed super PACs to contribute huge amounts of money that represented businesses, and that kind of closes the amount of money that individual people can contribute, because if you have a business that is making multi-billions a year, how many billionaires do you have who can compete against that?
Correct. And I think super PACs should end, even on a national level.
It's funny they call it Citizens United because it didn't unite a single citizen. Thank you so much for your call.
Yeah, well, have a good day.
You too, thank you. And to clarify something earlier, George Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to making false statements to the FBI. And that was in October of 2017, so a couple of months ago. And we're going to start back up in the conversation. We're talking about this memo that was released by Devin Nunes, Republican from California. And the big question is, do you think that this shows... that there is collusion against Donald Trump's presidency? Do you think that this is the type of thing that is showing that everybody is against Donald Trump and he is just trying to do his job? Or do you think that this is them doing their job and they're reaching for things to show collusion? What do you think? Because one thing we do know is all the information wasn't released, because it specifically is said by Devin Nunes that he made the memo and compiled it himself. So what hasn't been released? And if this information is released, does it show that the FBI was simply just doing their job? Because there's one thing for sure. The FBI informant who was giving the FBI the information was also working for the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. Somebody pointed out on Facebook, and they're right. So 7070 Cigars is in Westport, Massachusetts on Route 6. So if you're listening to me from Portugal, if you're listening to me, because I just see somebody tune in from the Azores, if you're listening to me anywhere in the world, you can join the conversation by commenting below. But, yeah, the big question to you is, do you think that this is showing collusion? Do you think that this is the FBI doing their job? So, to me, and I think that this is important, I think it's important to really kind of focus on what they were trying to do. It seems that they were using information that they thought was from a credible person to justify the background check, or not the background check, but the surveillance of an American citizen. Now, the big question is, why were they allowed to surveil using information from somebody who was a foreign national, right? Why were they allowed to go down the path of surveilling an American citizen using the information presented by somebody who used to work in Britain for I believe it was MI6 that he worked for. So, or MI5, I don't know, one of those military intelligence agencies. That'd be the same as using information from somebody like, from a place like Russia or Saudi Arabia to justify the background check of, or the surveillance of an American citizen. And to be clear, they had to have probable cause each and every time to not only get the original surveillance, but every 90 days to renew their surveillance at that point in time. So they were able to do this for close to a year, a little bit less than a year. It was 360 days that they were approved for, and they obviously a year is 365 days. So Do you think that this should happen? Do you think that this is something that should have never happened to begin with, and unfortunately, we're dealing with the brunt of the Democratic and the Republican Party going back and forth at each other? And did you read the memo? Do you think that this should have been classified to begin with? Do you think that this information should have eventually been able to come out? And would it have ever come out had there not been some type of political thing associated with it? And we were talking to Congressman Bill Keating earlier today, and Congressman Keating was saying, listen, there's more information to this. I've seen both sides, and unfortunately, they haven't released the meat and the potatoes that puts everything into context. Why was only a portion of it released? Was it in the name of national security, or was it in the name of politics? But this guy, Devin Nunes, keeps on coming up. This congressman from California keeps on coming up, Republican congressman from California, because he worked for Donald Trump. He worked on the transition team with Donald Trump, and he was big into and intertwined with Donald Trump. So is Devin Nunes being an opportunist, or is he doing what he truly believes is right? And that's a big question that you have to ask yourselves, because at the end of the day, our government should be representing the people and not themselves. But unfortunately, the system is set up in such a way, and I talk about this all the time, the system is set up in such a way where people can become easily removed from the people that they represent because of lobbying parties and things like that. And we're very fortunate here. We're very fortunate because on this show, it gives us the opportunity to talk to some of our congressmen. It gives us the opportunity to listen to some of our senators and our congressmen and the people who make policy decisions. So I think at the end of the day, we need to continue to push for what is right. What say you, Cole? You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR.
Good morning, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. So does it bother you at all that Devin Nunes was on the transition team and actually recused himself from the Intelligence Committee way back, and then suddenly he resurfaces with this cloak and dagger stuff?
So a lot of times in transition teams, there are people who are elected officials who are part of those transition teams. Now, you have to be able to separate the job you have to do as congressman with the job that you have to do on the transition team, right? So
I suppose.
So I think that him being on the transition team isn't an issue.
Well, it should be, because that's the reason Jeff Sessions recused himself. And Nunes had to be a part of that whole Russia, if you're out there, if you're listening, you got those emails from Hillary Clinton. Trump was not making a joke. First of all, he has no sense of humor, so he's unable to make a joke.
Okay, and
I think he is colluding with Russia, and I think if they let Mueller do his job, that will be the outcome.
So I actually disagree with you on one thing. I think that...
That's okay.
I think that Donald Trump does have a sense of humor, and there was no clear indication of that when he unscrewed a water bottle during the campaign and was flinging water all over the stage, indicating Marco Rubio needed to take a sip during the Republican response.
Well, someone must have told him about that. The other thing I wanted to ask, it eludes me now. Recently, I'm not sure the crowd she was addressing, but Nikki Haley was, again, cautioning against Russia. And she said, Russia is not our friend, which it isn't, and part of what they do is to sow the seeds of chaos and disruption, and they're doing a great job with this administration.
A big question that we need to ask is, these countries who are now becoming very friendlier than ever before, we have to ask, are we getting friendlier with these countries in the name of the United States, or are we getting friendlier with these countries in the name of Donald Trump's checkbook?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I fear. I think he's just using the president. I've said this from the beginning. He is using the presidency as a stepping stone to greater wealth and name recognition.
And I want to be clear, because these are questions that we should be asking, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You know me,
Absolutely.
I'm aggressively middle. I point out the problems with the Republican Party, I point out the problems with the Democratic Party, and I try to get everybody to work together. And that being said,
good luck to you in
yeah,
that.
you have to figure out a reason why some of these countries, like Russia, are now a big player when it comes to United States policy.
But I think that Donald Trump is being used by Putin. Putin's like unbelievably good at manipulating.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a
Bye.
great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich.
How you doing?
I'm well. Listen, I think if you take this all the way back to the time of the election, it kind of pieces together a puzzle of Hillary and company and the Democrats as to dirty politics. If you remember, do you remember when Trump came out and said Trump Towers in New York were being bugged and wiretapped? And at that time, President Obama came out and assured Trump and the American people that that wasn't the case.
Yes.
Well, obviously that was false. And then DNC, and again, Hillary and company paid for this foreign dossier. And during the Obama administration, Obama attempted to unseat Netanyahu in Israel. So this is all just comes down to dirty politics. And I'm not saying that Trump is also not involved by trying to get dirt on Hillary, but I do think it's clear-cut now through Podesta, Brazil, feeding questions in advance during CNN when they were having the debates, that there's a long litany here of dirt that existing in the Democratic National Party and Committee, as well as Clinton and company. So I really think just politics in itself needs to be cleaned up on all sides, both sides of the fence. We shouldn't be intervening and attempting to overthrow other elections in other countries, and nor should that be happening in this country either.
You know,
So,
I
go
have
ahead.
to cut you short because we had 10 seconds, or actually we're going into the news break now. So I think you bring up some fair points. We shouldn't be intervening in other countries. Thank you so much for your call and your opinions. We shouldn't be squabbling and focusing on what everybody is doing. We should be focusing on doing our jobs. We're going to get right back into the conversation. We're talking about the released memo that was released by Devin Nunes. He's a congressman from California, a Republican congressman from California, and we are going to continue talking and taking your calls, 508-673-1480, because guess what? This is the Republican Party saying that it's showing clear collusion against Donald Trump, and it's the Democratic Party saying we haven't released all the information yet, and some people are stuck in between all that. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How you doing today?
I'm all right. You?
Not bad. What say you?
Well, here's something that drains my brain. We got all of this nonsense going on, but yet Russians, the United States and Russia share a space program. The Americans use the Russians to get into space and share all that precious information, but yet we squabble about all this nonsense down here on God's given land. So how is it that we can share all of this information? We use the Russians to get in and out of space because we don't use NASA anymore, but yet we squabble about all of this that's going on politically. This is all mind games. It's all mind control, in my opinion.
So
what do you have to say?
So you think that this is all mind control to create drama where there is none?
Yeah.
Okay, and you know that makes sense.
If you don't believe me, you can read William Milton Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse, and he was top secret naval intelligence.
Well, let me let you know why I think that argument makes sense. Because the mainstream media focuses on creating division and focusing on Democrat against Republican, Hillary against Trump. People who are calling themselves liars and cheats, or other people liars and cheats and thieves, as opposed to talking about actual policy, right? So,
and one other thing, I remember Colin Powell, he was asked about all the information that they had on weapons of mass destruction, and he kept putting it off. He never presented it. But yet we went to war with Iraq over something that supposedly they didn't even have paperwork on. It was just made up.
And the Iraq War made people billionaires, which is scary.
They went there for the resources, like we invaded Libya.
Well, I don't think we went there for the resources because we really didn't take the resources. What we went there for was to... let me finish.
Like we took the resources. Converted to corporations to make it look like we didn't take it.
Let me finish. So we didn't go there to take resources. What we did is we went there to allow corporations to make resources, meaning that the government paid individual corporations large sums of money to do jobs that the military could have done themselves. I'll let you make the final point, caller.
Well, I mean, people are just in a fog. They believe everything they see on TV. Nobody reads anything anymore. I mean, there's one other thing. You can look online. This is online. It's called My Globalist. Oh, geez, I can't even remember it. A letter from my globalist friend. And just read that. It's only like about 6 pages. Maybe you should read that to your audience. Maybe they'll wake up. That's all I got.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Well, good morning.
How you doing?
Hey, congratulations to the Eagles.
Congratulations to the Eagles if you're an Eagles fan.
Yeah.
Or anybody who isn't a Patriots fan.
I know one thing, the Russians, they didn't share with us.
Oh, how about this one? How about congratulations to the Patriots for being AFC champions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I just wanted to go on to this. I know one thing the Russians didn't share was blood in 2 wars. And how dare you yell USA in that chamber. You know, with this FISA warrant, there's several steps it's going to go through before it even goes to a judge. And Trump's Fox News network is putting it out there like this went nilly-willy to a judge and just hand it out. And it's a bunch of... It's awful, man. It's just awful.
Well, it's funny because I have it on Fox News right now, and it's saying in the headlines, counter memo, as if it's counterintelligence. Why don't we just release the memo as a whole as opposed to bits and pieces?
Right now, you know, to stay low for 3 months right now with this coming out.
Right.
Okay?
Now the thing is when I look at this memo, when I look at the memo released by Nunes...
What else you want to release?
I ask myself the question, is this really a big deal? Is this really a big deal that somebody had a bias against Donald Trump and stated it clearly? Or is it the job of the person who's taking the information from the informant to say, hey, this person has a bias, maybe we don't use all of this information?
Hey, so you put a uniform on. Did you see any Russian over there fighting for us?
You know, I saw the Portuguese army, I saw the Fijian army, I saw a lot of these armies from places that could send maybe 20, 30 soldiers, 50 soldiers. I didn't see any Russians.
Okay. All right.
But
you have yourself a good day and yell USA.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care.
SAR, we're talking about the Nunes memo. I guess we could call it the Steele document. We could call it the Page memo. But I'm calling it the Devin Nunes memo because there seems to be information that's missing from it. And if it is all the information, congratulations to that gentleman for setting the precedent where the American people are going to be able to see a lot more of what the FBI, apparently I'm spelling Gloria in the process of saying FBI. All right, we're going to go right to the callers. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hello.
How you doing?
All right, I had a phone beep here. All right, I'm wondering about one thing. When they go for the FISA warrant, there is no other, let's say, lawyer who stands on the other side and questions what the information being given to the judge is. Consequently, the guy who's giving, or the lawyer who is asking for the warrant, has to have all his data in a row and supposedly is checked. Now, that's okay if it happened and that was on the first time around. But it had to be renewed every 90 days.
Right.
Consequently, what I'm saying is that lawyer who went in and put the original in and then came back 90 days later, and by then somebody had to know.
Well,
somebody had to know that the information on the dossier was bogus.
And real quick, when any time a law enforcement agency is trying to get a warrant for any reason, the person who's being investigated doesn't have an attorney. And
that's right. They don't get the other side of the issue or any check.
Right.
Consequently, when the FBI pulled a real boondoggle by just going along with that, I think, number one, that particular lawyer who issued that probably should be up for grabs as far as if you wanted to sue him. And the other thing is, him being a lawyer, he's supposedly a group of the judiciary, and they have to have some basic rules. And he violated the rules, so you're actually in, contempt.
So you're concerned about the ethics around the whole thing.
Because the civil rights issue of the individual, which was the whole thing about all this national, all that people looking at the records of Americans, that is the reason that everybody wanted everybody to make sure that you had to go beyond a reasonable doubt. They didn't do their homework, so I don't think the reasonable doubt is there. Now, I think personally, after the first time, the second time they came up because they had to be renewed every 90 days, game's on. It looks like somebody went in there and did it on purpose.
Now, I want to be clear, and thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. And I want to be clear, every single 90 days there had to be new information, new probable cause submitted to allow the investigation to continue on. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hey, how are we doing, Rick?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. Still no one talking about us buying gas from Russia.
So go for it.
Huh?
Go for it.
You didn't hear this shit?
Go for it.
Well, they're buying, Boston Gas is buying Russia from Siberia.
Okay.
It's coming in right now in LNG tankers to Boston.
Yep, and I remember you talking about that last week. And the thing about imports and exports is I don't believe that we had an embargo against Russia to begin with.
It's just amazing what's going on,
So ultimately,
when you hear all this talk, we're talking about all this stuff, and nobody even knows what's in that paperwork.
So any company has the opportunity to purchase any good from any other country as long as they meet the laws of the United States, and that appears to have happened.
Yeah.
And that's something that could have happened under any administration.
That's why when I woke up Saturday morning, I turned the radio on. I was listening to Russian music and warming my house with Russian gas.
Thank you so much.
Which country is this?
I think it's a fair question, but ultimately I think it's supposed to be a country by the people, for the people. Thank you so much for your call.
Come on.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
You still believe that fairy tale?
You know, that's why we have the process the way we do. And if
we got that fairy tale because the people in this country have no guts to take their country back.
Now, here's what I say. If people start becoming informed, if people start figuring out what the real facts are, if people start throwing away this mainstream media soap opera that's happening, then they will start to focus on what's really happening. And when that happens, our government will change.
People are not ready to put their fortunes on the line like our forefathers did. They have no guts to take their country back. And these politicians and these big corporations know it.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard.
How you doing?
The Russian issue. Let's go back in time. World War II.
Okay.
Who won World War II?
Russia.
There you go.
Yep, Russia.
You think maybe people should have listened to Patton, those in the military, instead of saying he was insane and suffered from dementia? I think he was right.
Well,
he was absolutely right.
In America, we like to paint this story that America won the war against Germany.
You know, and you and I saying that, they're going to think we're communists. Poland Poland was the biggest loser in World War II.
But if you
the English and we promised them their country back. They never got it back.
So here's the funny part about this. So when you look at the World War II and you look at the amount of casualties that happened on the Russia side and on the Western Front compared to the Eastern Front as opposed to the Western Front,
when they were enormous,
the amount of lives that were lost who were British and American didn't even come close to the amount of Russian lives.
Okay, and then when Churchill met with Stalin, and I know people say, "What the hell has that got to do with things going on today?" It does. You remember? I don't know if you ever read this or saw this in a documentary. The Polish elite, he called them the elite, the officer corps, and those in the military.
Mm-hmm.
I figure how many thousands he killed. And he was sitting at a table having dinner, and Churchill asked him, "What happened to the Polish military prisons?" And supposedly Stalin nonchalantly took a sip of his vodka and said, "We killed them," and went on with his meal. Churchill was upset. And then Roosevelt,
the funny part
couldn't believe it. He said, Joseph Stalin would never do that.
The funny part about this dynamic is, you're right, the Western side allowed the Russians to continue control over Poland, which was a strategic strong point for Russia. Now, here's the other side of this. When you really look at World War II as a whole, it did nothing but help countries' imperialistic nature. And look at...
Yes, the French, Vietnam, and the English, Vietnam, because Churchill intervened when Ho Chi Minh was fighting the Japanese, and I know I've repeated this before, and people might think I'm making this up. Ho Chi Minh was fighting the Japanese, and he was hoping that the United States would support him. Churchill intervened and said, "Our colonial interests."
Yeah, and that's the problem right there, is they were looking at expansion, and the question is would that happen today? I don't know. But
I know it's ancient history, and people are saying that's got nothing to do with today. The Mideast, Lawrence, Colonel Lawrence, who fought with the Arab tribes, beat the Turks. They were promised to have their own country. No, who divided the country? Who divided the Mideast up?
Right.
It was the French and the English.
So the funny part about that is a lot of the wars that we're fighting today in the Middle East are because of those territories that were drawn erroneously back then.
You're absolutely right, and people don't take the time. I know it's a dry read. I couldn't finish it. I'll try some. The Seven Pillars, which was written by Colonel Lawrence. And it's a dry read, but it's a lot of factual stuff in there.
Thank you so much for your call.
You take care. Have a
Thank
good
you
one.
for the history lesson. It was a good one. Have a great day. We're going to continue the conversation about this memo, this Nunez memo that is talking about Carter Page and the investigation into Carter Page, who was a former volunteer advisor for the Trump campaign. He's a U.S. citizen, and one of the key things is surrounding this informant, Christopher Steele, who was employed by the Democratic National Convention, who paid him $160,000. The Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign, $160,000 to do this background check on Carter Page, who then became an FBI informant and withheld that he was working with the DNC, withheld that he was getting paid. So now Donald Trump is saying, because the Democrats want to release their own memo to talk about the whole situation, whether you believe that that is right or if it's going to be more spin, Donald Trump is calling Adam Schiff little Adam Schiff. Does that help the process at all? This arguing and calling people names back and forth. I know that's how we got elected to office, but now as the President of the United States, should you be calling people names, or should you just be doing the job that people put you in office to do? And tweeting is not the answer necessarily, right? And I have somebody standing in my background. You know, we have Wayne Rigo, who walked in, and he's actually on the next show standing in for Ray Mitchell. And he it's kind of snuck up on me, so I forgot that Twitter was an actual thing. So we're going to ask him to come on right now. And Wayne, if you can pull a mic together. Yeah, you're live on the air right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're having fun. But yeah, the big question would be, don't mess with that volume knob.
No,
in front of
I'm
you.
not touching it.
All right. So what do you think of this whole memo?
Honestly, everyone wants people to look at the left hand while the things are going on with the right hand.
I think that's fair.
It's a magician.
Yeah.
It's a magic act.
So what's happening in the right hand? Government shutdown?
I think that's coming.
Yep.
Have they agreed yet? Friday's the 8th, right?
Nope. And immigration is the thing that looks like is being held hostage.
Again.
Yeah.
So again, and I have friends that I have, obviously, people that one person that I know that is a DACA kid.
Yep.
Hard worker. You've seen him work. Hard worker. Great kid. He's got 3 jobs.
Yep.
And they're going to hold that hostage for that one issue for the rest of the government.
And it's sad because the question is, why can't we vote on things individually? Why do we have to have these earmarks, this pork fat? And it's funny because the Democrats are saying that shouldn't happen, but they were the ones who were doing it during a Democratic presidency. They're both doing it.
Look, are they representing us? The question I always ask on my show is, are they representing us?
Right. And it's something that we talk about here pretty often is, who is your government really working for? Right. Are they working for you?
Now, let me ask you a question. During the last shutdown, 3 days, right?
Yep.
Did you notice anything different?
Government workers did.
Yeah. But did we notice anything different?
No. And I think if it hadn't been over a weekend, we would have noticed a lot.
A couple of things, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And one of them would have been tax returns. Tax returns would have came back a lot slower.
And that's going to, and unfortunately, that'll be the thing that everyone wants and waiting for so they can spend it.
Right.
So that will hurt. Absolutely.
Now, earlier in the show, we had Congressman Bill Keating, a Democrat from Massachusetts, come on the show.
Oh, did he? I didn't hear him.
Yeah, he actually came on the show, and we were talking, and he actually said that he doesn't think that we should be holding our government hostage with some of these ideas, which I think was a great point.
I like if he said that, which I missed. I usually listen, but I missed it if he said that. Congratulations,
well,
Congressman Keating.
Here I am.
Because I'm not a fan.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you know where I stand. I am not a Democrat. I am not a Republican.
Right.
I'm in the middle somewhere.
Right.
And majority of the people who listen to this show, majority of the people in the country are either in extreme or they're in the middle somewhere. So it's funny because I actually agree. We shouldn't be holding our government hostage to push forward an agenda. And there needs to be some type of communication between the Republicans and the Democrats, but unfortunately I have Fox News on right now, and they're promoting the hatred more than actually trying to promote a compromise.
No, on the way in, I was listening to you. Do you think that hatred war, do you think some of that is some people like to create that to further divide the Democrat and the Republicans?
You know what I think it is? I think it's mainstream media who creates it to increase their ratings.
You could be right.
Because they're competing against things like the Kardashians. They're competing against things like, is the Real World still on?
Because, I can't believe if you put Paul Ryan in a room with Nancy Pelosi, God help us, or someone like that they couldn't agree on anything. Is there so much dislike for those people, for each side that they won't even talk?
Here's what I think happens. I think you put them in the room and they're cordial to each other, and then the second that they get the cameras in front of them, they start fighting.
And we as voters should communicate the fact that we want them to work together.
Right.
It's that simple.
Right. I think it's important, but there are some people who don't want them working together. There are some people who are enjoying what they're watching on Fox News and on CNBC.
And some people benefit from a deep divide. Some people actually benefit from a deep divide.
Right. You know who that is? People who benefit when government doesn't get things done. And who is that? That's not the average working Joe. That's corporations usually, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is that?
Good question.
Right. So we talk about things like marijuana legislation and why marijuana is being so hated against when opioids are running rampant.
Right.
And we talk about things like
why? Because huge corporations make money on the opioids.
Right. And if marijuana comes in as potentially a way to treat pain, guess what happens to opioids?
They're going to go way down anyway. They're going to be non-existent, I think, in our lifetime.
You think so?
I do.
I don't know, because there are so many countries who are reliant on the poppy as their main export, one of them being Afghanistan, which means that America, by indirectly, is reliant on the poppy to be successful.
Well, at one time, Afghanistan, we were paying them years ago not to grow poppies.
Yeah, but then that shifted. We were trying to get them to grow corn.
Right, or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah,
but there's more money, obviously, in that little flour than there is in corn. So.
Right. And now it seems like South America is trying to compete, but we have this thing where the Afghani government owns the poppy, but also Taliban owns the poppy. And it's funny because they're saying Donald Trump is blowing up poppy fields, but he's blowing up Taliban poppy fields. He's not blowing up Afghani government poppy fields. Right?
How about just blowing them up, period? I don't know.
Right. Well, because you essentially put an economy into a ruin.
Look, the United States, we as voters have to wake up and say we're not going to tolerate this anymore. When in 2010 election, 96% of the incumbents were reelected to Congress, and out of the major races, there was only two that had was really a political campaign, an actual race. So it's a joke. And when was the last time our congressmen here were challenged?
So you consider yourself a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
All right. Now, let's kind of see where you stand on some issues.
All right.
Just so I can kind of talk about how the ideology of the parties are changing. So, immigration.
Immigration. We have immigration laws that exist today. How about if they just followed those laws?
Yeah.
Like if you overstay your visa, you get arrested and you get shipped back right away.
But what about this DACA thing, which was...
Well, you know something? That population, unlike any other, is affected. It was not their choice to come here. They followed their parents, so we should have an avenue for them to become citizens and leave politics out of it. It's a human thing to do.
It's actually interesting because your initial argument is very conservative, but it seems like your approach to DACA is left-leaning almost.
Well, I don't know if it's a left or a right issue. Is it a left or a right issue, or how about a human issue?
I think it's fair. And to bring it back to the memo, did you read the memo?
I haven't.
All right. So the memo states that Christopher Steele was working for the Democratic National Committee and working for the Clinton campaign, but also an FBI informant, and one of the reasons why Carter Page was investigated. And he stated to Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr multiple times that he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected. Do you think that this memo is something that proves that the FBI is working against Donald Trump or not?
No, I don't think that has anything to do with it.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on.
The bottom line is this. If Russia was involved, and it's pretty clear that they were involved in one of our elections,
right,
that is like the ultimate crime as far as I'm concerned.
And somebody on Facebook commented, obviously, this, and I think they're referring to the collusion of, does this show that the Democratic Party is working against Donald Trump? Does it show that there's collusion against Donald Trump? Somebody says on Facebook Live, it obviously does, and it shows Hillary would stop at nothing to acquire power. Now, to that point, that's something that both parties do, and that's something that happens in every single election for every single party, working its way all the way down to local politics, right? Unfortunately, politicians feel, as opposed to trying to figure out how to represent people better, they figure out how to dig up dirt on their opponents to use it against them. And they figure out how to spin things to make people look bad or worse, as opposed to simply do their job. Something else to talk about is, it appears put out by the Wall Street Journal, is John McCain and Senator Coons from Delaware. So you have John McCain, senator from Arizona, who's a Republican, and you have Senator Coons, who is a Democrat from Delaware, and that's Senator Chris Coons, who's a Democrat from Delaware, who's working together to come up with an immigration bill that doesn't include a wall, funding for a wall. And I think they're doing this to try to find a way to get the government not to shut down. And that shows compromise, working together. So congratulations to Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, and Senator John McCain, Republican from Arizona, for working together on behalf of the people, because this is the kind of stuff that we need, as opposed to this stalemate and holding government hostage. Now, hopefully people can get behind this. I hope that Congressman Keating is still listening and hearing about how this is happening at the Senate level. Hopefully it's something that could push down to the congressional level and get things done. So, to dive back into the conversation, this memo, the big question is, does this show collusion, and why was there only a piece of the memo, according to the Democrats, released? We're in our last segment, so if you want to join the conversation, you have the opportunity to do it, 508-673-1480. We have some open lines left, and you don't want to miss your chance if you feel strongly about this one way or the other. The question to you is, do you think that this shows that the Republicans are right? Does this show that Donald Trump is right and people are working against him? in the Republican Party in government, in the Democratic Party in government and in all across the board? Or are the Democrats right in saying that all the information wasn't released and this was just hand-picked information to make the situation look worse than it really is? You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
Good morning, Rich. I read the memo, and I think it's indicative of the problem in our political system. It's just sound bites, basically. It infers that the only reason the court issued these orders is because of that one memo, which I don't think is true. It doesn't say that there was nothing else there. It just focuses on one thing. And then the media picks that up, echoes it, and it doesn't give you enough information. I'll give you an example, a local example. I heard, I don't know if it was you or someone else, interview Sheriff Hodgson.
I did, yes.
The county sheriff?
Yep.
And all you read in the media out here in California is he wants to send prisoners to the border to help Trump build the wall, right?
Yep.
So it makes him sound like a kind of crazy right-wing guy. He was one of the most thoughtful sheriffs I've ever heard talk about the programs he's put in the jails to help people get jobs when they come out. None of that comes out in the national media. They cherry-pick one soundbite to make him seem one way. And I think the Republican memo cherry-picks a few pieces of information to make you draw a conclusion that's just not there.
Well, there's one thing about press releases, right? They tell you when you release a press release, you want it to be easily readable and get straight to the point. And that's what this memo looks like. It looks like it was truncated to make it easily readable. What say you?
But it doesn't give you enough information. It infers certain things.
Right.
Like, for instance, that this was the only piece of information the judge had before them. So they based their entire decision on this.
Now,
we don't know if that's... Usually in these cases, I would imagine, whether it's going before a local judge or a FISA court, you want to have a number of pieces of information that reinforce each other. We don't know because we haven't seen the report. It's classified.
Now, it's funny because one of the things that is actually in the memo is quotes, and I'm going to paraphrase what the quote is, that Christopher Steele was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected. And that's paraphrasing, but the actual statement in quotes was very similar looking. So it's funny because they're talking about the connection of Christopher Steele and how he was working with Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, whose wife worked for Fusion GPS, and they did opposition work for the DNC. But Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr didn't sign off on this investigation at all. It was other deputy attorney generals or attorneys general, and it was the attorney general themselves who signed off on these investigation. So how does that make you feel? Like, does it seem like he removed himself from the process because he might be seen as having a slant?
I mean, again, there's just not enough information there. There's one thing at the end when they talk about how they started looking at Carter Page in 2013 when all this stuff was happening in 2016. I mean, the guy, to me, seems like a loudmouth who bragged about his connections in Russia. He lived there for 4 years. I mean, that's a dumb thing to say if you don't want to get FBI attention.
Well, he broke the cardinal rule, right? He broke the cardinal rule by bragging to Yahoo as an informant for them.
Right. I mean, it's just...
Well, how's the weather out in California, by the way?
It's almost up to 70. It's been a heat wave the last 2 days.
Oh, man. You know, I need one of those days right now. Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. So, if you're looking for a place to get the muck and the grime off of your car because we're not in 70-degree temperature like California and the San Francisco area is right now, you're going to want to head over to Vic's Car Wash on 235 John Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, so you can not only clean your dirty, smelly car, but you can also get it detailed if you want. They've been in business for 3/4 of a century, and you don't stick around that long unless you know what you're doing. So you can get unlimited car washes over at Vic's Car Wash starting at $39.99 a month. And you can go in there literally every day if you want to and get your car clean so it looks spick and span all the time starting at $39.99 a month. So Vic's Car Wash on 235 John Street in Fall River. Visit them. Be there or be square. And to kind of get kind of close, we're getting kind of close to the end of the show. So let me kind of close with this. In the upcoming days, people are going to be using this memo to justify the reason why government is shutting down. because the Democrats are working against the Republicans and using shifty means working against the Republicans, and vice versa. The unfortunate part is all this turmoil and all this animosity needs to end in order to get government to do their job. The only way that government is going to do their job is by sitting in a room together, duking it out, and coming up with some type of consensus. And I want to applaud Senator Chris Coons and Senator John McCain, Democrat and Republican, respectively, for the work that they're doing to come up with a bipartisan effort towards immigration so government does not shut down. Yeah, the big question is, do we need to make sure that government is working together? And I say yes. I say that is their job. Somebody called in earlier and said that there is no incentive for government to work together. And until the people stand up, and until the people start getting informed and use their rights, government is going to continue to do what it's doing right now. But the good thing is they're at least taking some accountability for their actions. They're willing to come on, they're willing to have the conversations, and they're willing to answer the tough questions. And I want to thank again my guest earlier today, and that was Congressman Bill Keating, Democrat from Massachusetts, who came on today and talked about what's happening in government. He talked about the Super Bowl too. Sorry, Patriots fans. Congratulations to the Eagles fans. But he talked about the accountability and how government should not be held hostage because of ideals, or because of agendas. So ideally, government should be continue to work over and over and over again until the end of time. So until that happens, until we start voting on things individually as opposed to packaging in all these things into the bills that we do, things aren't going to get fixed. And to Senator McCain was a big proponent of that when he ran for president.